Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some books that I was really excited to pick up this year. These were among some of my most anticipated releases for the year of 2023, and I wanted to essentially give a rating as to whether or not they met the expectations or the hype that I feel like a lot of us had placed on them, or if they did not, or if they exceeded the hype. And I figured I'd go ahead and start with one that I know for a lot of us was one of our most, if not our most anticipated releases, and that would be Brandon Sanderson's Secret Projects. For me, I don't think I have too unpopular of an opinion here. I think a lot of us feel pretty similarly in thinking that Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England, I think is the full title. I always get it a little, they're up there. But regardless, this one did not meet my hype. I was unsure in general with it being a type of story that I'm not usually gravitating toward. The fact that it's more of a sci-fi, I woke up, I don't have my memories type of story. Those aren't necessarily the ones I typically gravitate toward. So I was already a little on the fence. So in some ways you could almost say it met my expectations because I already wasn't really all that invested. But at the end of the day, I was still anticipating I would have a pretty good amount of enjoyment from this, and it's not that I had none, I didn't end up enjoying it all that much. So for that reason, I would say this one falls into the camp of not meeting expectations. I'll go ahead and throw in, I have mentioned this one more recently because it was the last of the Secret Projects, that Sunlit Man also did not meet my expectations, just purely in the fact that because it takes place so much further, actually that's not purely, but I'll elaborate in a moment. I'll finish the thought that I'm on. So Sunlit Man takes place so much later than what we currently have of a lot of the Cosmere that I didn't feel as though I could really understand the main character's, the things that he is experiencing and dealing with quite to the extent that I wanted. And it made I felt like there was this disconnect between me and the main character. So I didn't love that, but also I didn't find that it was as filled with depth as I was hoping. The world was really fascinating and really interesting, but the side characters did not really grip me. The plot didn't really grip me. I thought the villain was among some of the weaker ones that we've seen from Sanderson. So for those reasons, this one also did not, unfortunately, meet my expectations. However, Tress, which was the one that kicked everything off, definitely met my expectations. I thought it was so fun. A lot of us knew the premise going in and knew it was going to be a form of a Princess Bride type story, and I was really excited for that, and I found that I greatly enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it. It's not an absolute new favorite. If I were to tier rank the Cosmere books, which I plan to do soon, having reread them, this one would not place in the top tier because it still doesn't have those really strong emotional hits like some of the other ones. And for me to really have a book be an all-time favorite, it needs to have the really, really monumental highs and then those really intense lows. It kind of has to have that full range. And this one, it didn't have that. I didn't expect it to, though, which is why I would still say that it met my expectations, because I was expecting a cozy, fun, sweet adventure, and that is exactly what I got. That said, I definitely felt like Yumi and the Nightmare Painter exceeded my expectations. It helps that Yumi weirdly had a rougher start for me. So when I first began with that one, I was thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna like this one that much. I sort of had a disconnect with the main character, similar, not exactly, but similar to the character from Sunlit Man. I didn't think I was ever going to be all that engrossed in their story, but I do think it was intentional, as the things that this character is dealing with are things that have to do with expression and being vulnerable and open to friends and to other individuals and even to themselves. So I thought that the payoff for their character development was worth it. Plus, the character of Yumi was adorable. The world was fascinating. I really liked seeing how everything came together. And as I've stated many a time, seeing the inspirations from Final Fantasy X were really exciting. So I just had a lot of fun with this one. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, but the more I sat on it, the more I'm like, man, I loved it. Now, it doesn't quite have those really intense highs and lows like what I want out of my all-time favorites, but it is still, it has a special place in my heart, and it's hard to compare it to some of the more serious types of Cosmere books that we get. That said, we'll move away from Sanderson. I'm actually going to end on some other Sanderson books, but they're not new releases, so I'll save that for the end. But I wanted to switch now to some non-Sanderson works, and we'll jump into Engines of Chaos, as well as the Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. I almost wanted to include all of the original Shades of Magic trilogy as I reread that this year in preparation for Threads of Power. But the reason I'm grouping it with Engines of Chaos, even though they're nothing alike, is because these two both ended up having a similar fear for me, which is that I don't know if any of you experience this, but when I do rereads, I become oddly nervous that I'm not going to like the story as much as I remember liking it, and then the whole time I'm like, what if it's not as good? What if it's not as good? Because I don't want to disrupt that love that I had from before. It's almost like if you go to rewatch one of your favorite movies from when you were a kid, and you're like, this is kind of not the best, but because of the nostalgia, you loved it so much, and now that love is almost tainted, if that makes any sense. So I was nervous going into Threads of Power and rereading Shades of Magic. Specifically, what I'm describing is obviously for Shades of Magic, as it was the reread. But I really enjoyed my reread, and so for that, it actually exceeded my expectations, as I enjoyed it more than the first time around. I think I'm a rare individual in that sense. And then Threads of Power really delivered on everything I was wanting from the books. I loved that we got so much more of the original cast than what I was expecting. I thought they were just going to be kind of background characters, and they weren't, which was really something I was excited for, because I like our original cast. If you don't like them as much, that's probably going to be a con. But I also liked seeing the way in which everything expanded, as well as just having some new mysteries unfold. I really liked all of that, and I like this transition into this next era, you could say, of the Shades worlds. I really liked that. And with Engines of Chaos, while it's not a reread, the first one being Engines of Empire, I was still so nervous for this because I love that first book so much, but it's not particularly popular. It's not something that seems to be gaining much traction. And as much as I don't like, I don't like admitting this, but I think all of us have experienced this before. You almost feel a sense of validation when other people like what you like. I know that it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't, and that's why so often when I read and review books, I don't look at what other people are saying, because I really want my feelings toward the books to be pure, you could say, and what I tell you to not be influenced by outside sources, because I know we all have that as something that can happen. But with Engines of Empire, the first one, I read it, I loved it, I thought it was so amazing, I hype it up all the time, epic fantasy exactly how I want it, and it hasn't gained a lot of popularity and a lot of tension, and so there's like this weird part of me that's like, did I not read it right? Like, I know that sounds stupid, but I'm just like, nobody seems to be noticing it, and it deserves notice. So when I came back to Engines of Chaos, I was like, please be as good as I think, please be as good as I think. And it was even better. It was better, in my opinion, than the first one. I loved getting the new perspectives. I thought it was so interesting to see the other guilds and to see how cutthroat everyone is. I liked seeing some character growth, you could say. It's almost like character transition into a different... I don't know how to describe it without giving away spoilers, but I was so happy that this one was as good as I was hoping, even better than I was hoping. So both of these exceeded my expectations. What I was wanting from them, I not only got, but it was even better than I was hoping. So yay for that. And also, you should all check out Engines of Empire. I'm sure you're all really tired of me saying that all the time, though. Next up, we have Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This one I'm not sure if I want to categorize as met my expectations or maybe didn't, because I have pretty high expectations from her works. I still enjoyed this book. It's not a new favorite, so I'm going to go ahead and say it met my expectations, but it's kind of like met minus, because it almost falls into the camp of it didn't meet the hype that I'd placed on it. I was thinking this might be up there with Nettle and Bone. I thought maybe I'd even like it more than Nettle and Bone. It is more so a novella, whereas Nettle and Bone, while very short, is more of a full-length novel. So I think that maybe was part of it. I don't know that this one would have changed much if there had been more pages, because I don't think the story that was being told necessarily required it. I just think it was never going to actually with what it is, it was never going to really pull at my heart, I guess you could say, as a full-length novel that has more time to do deep exploration would. So, Met minus. And then we have the Bone Shard War. This one, I'm gonna say Met minus also. The first book was my favorite in the trilogy, but I don't think that the series tanked or anything. I just think it never kind of expanded beyond that first book into something. It didn't get better and better every single book. And the second one definitely was not as much to my liking as the first, so in a way I kind of anticipated, I don't know if we're ever gonna hit that really interesting, unique feel that that first book got. And I didn't mind that, but it did keep this one from, I didn't have too high of expectations when I went into it. Still really enjoyed it. I really liked the ending, the very, very end. I liked how everything came together. There were some bumps along the road. The pacing was a little odd in places, and also the very opening, the pacing was a little odd. So again, like Thornhedge, Met minus. I was hoping that this, I've said this a number of times in other videos, I was hoping that this series would be catapulted into one of my new favorites of all time as far as completed fantasy series go. It didn't quite do that, but still a good series. I definitely would still recommend it, and it's still up there. I still really, really, really like this whole trilogy. I recommend it all the time, especially if you're looking for fantasy that's a little bit more unique maybe than a lot of the other things that we've gotten. The last two are the Sanderson ones that were not new releases. These ones are tough for me because they did sort of fall into what I didn't want to have happen with Engines of Chaos and Threads of Power, and for the other two, they luckily didn't. And with these two, it wasn't just that they weren't as good as I remember thinking they were, but one of them in particular, I was like, yeah, I really didn't care for it much, and that's hard to say. We'll start with the one that wasn't as much of a blow, and that would be Warbreaker. I still really like Warbreaker. I still love the world, I still love the magic, I still have a lot of fun, and I think that the characters have great arcs throughout the story. I just, having read Mistborn 3 times at this point, having read Stormlight twice, I just don't think Warbreaker is quite on that level. And before, it didn't, and I'm not saying it needs to be because it's a very different story with a very different tone, but I still loved before, the first time I read it. I don't know if it was because it was so different and that contrast was exciting and inviting, but this time around, I'm like, it kind of just, it's not that it's just surface level, because that's not true. I definitely think the characters have depth and their growth, and a lot, especially the character of Vivenna, of what she endures and goes through, it's amazing what her character experiences and how she allows her experiences to change her for the better. I really like that with her character, but it doesn't have what I was describing before, that depth that I really want out of my favorites. So this one, still really like Warbreaker. It just didn't quite hit as much the second time. I think part of it too is that a lot of this one is sort of a mystery as far as the politics go and who's behind things and what's going on. And so the first time around, trying to puzzle all of that out is really exciting. But sort of to this book's detriment, rereading a lot of Sanderson starts to highlight how he goes about foreshadowing. And on top of that, I already know. So it's not as exciting the second time around because the foreshadowing almost, I don't know, there's something about how it's done in Mistborn where it feels more like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was there the whole time right there in front of me with certain things. And with this one, it just starts to feel really obvious. And I think I kind of had started to piece things together the first time around anyway, so then second time around, I was sort of just waiting for the reveals to happen. I feel as though, as I'm speaking, it's sounding so much more negative than it is. It's not that it's a negative thing. And I just want to be clear, it met my expectations. That's the camp that I would say it falls into. It just didn't exceed them like it did the first time around. So it's going to be a Met minus again. And then sadly, Oathbringer was, it did not meet. And I already have always considered Oathbringer to be my least favorite among the Stormlight Archive books. The full length, not including the novellas, which are basically books because they're pretty long. But Oathbringer's never been my favorite. However, with rereading, I have enjoyed Way of Kings even more. I've enjoyed Words of Radiance even more. And then I got around to Oathbringer, and I was thinking, Okay, I'll probably enjoy this one even more, and some of what maybe, I don't want to say went over my head, but some of the details in the world building and the greater political issues, maybe I will have a firmer grasp on those things, and so I won't find them as tedious maybe as I did the first time. No. This time around, I really feel reaffirmed in which does not say it's objectively true, just in how I felt about it the first time. I feel reaffirmed in thinking that this is the weakest entry. I really want to say again, that's just my feeling, because I love Way of Kings so much. I love Rhythm of War. Words of Radiance, I like it a lot too. It's just not quite as high as those other two. It has some explosive, wonderful moments, some of the best quotes, some of the coolest, like, yeah, and you guys know the moments that those you know, like, honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do is great, and the skies are mine. Those moments are great. Oathbringer has a couple of parts. I would say some of the things toward the beginning with one of the characters finding out more about their family, I'll say. I'm trying not to give anything away if somebody's not picked Oathbringer up. And then obviously there's some pretty tragic moments that have some very big consequences. But the pacing for me, like the amount of time that a group of characters is away from another character, and a whole other group of characters, I should say, it took forever. I forgot how long. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that it takes pretty much once they get there until the end of the book before everybody comes together again, and it feels like not, I don't know, it didn't feel as organic. I could go on and on and on, but for me, Oathbringer is just not as well-paced. It doesn't have the moments that I want, and the backstory chapters weirdly made me dislike the character more. I feel like the backstory, I need to clarify for those that have read it. Of course they make you dislike the character to an extent, because you're like, oh, okay, well, they committed atrocities. But I just mean, I don't know, before there was the sense of, but look at the growth of them, and look at the way they own their pain, and they don't allow this villainous being to corrupt them, and they take it upon themselves, and they have ownership of it. And it is really powerful. I'm not saying it's not powerful. I know some people that really love this character are like, how dare you? But I don't know, it's just, I'm like, it's pretty tough to read about you committing atrocities and then try to be like, yeah, but you're like not as bad now. I do like, though, I want to say this, I do like that we went there and we really explored a character that did truly terrible things, and we not only explore that in depth, but we show the ugly sides of it, and we show how it crushed them, and then we show how hard it is to continue to live on after that. I mean, I applaud writing a character like that. I don't want to imply that I think that that is poorly written. Anyway, I could say so much more. I could do a whole video about this, but there's going to be a discussion. I'm not sure if it'll go up before this video or after this video. We will do a whole in-depth discussion about Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, so you'll get to see more spoiler thoughts as we discuss, and you'll also get to see other people's perspectives besides just mine, because I think that I maybe have the very unpopular opinion here. But it's really truly more so the pacing that really makes it so that this one didn't meet my expectations. Those other things are less about disappointment and more just personal, like, no, why was the character like that? But the other things, the pacing, the monumental moments in present day, and I just don't think it's as strong as the other books. So for that reason, this one is sadly not meeting my expectations upon reread. That's it, though. I really feel bad now that I ended on a negative. But that's it for some thoughts on primarily new releases, but a couple of rereads as well. I'm very curious what I described about when you go to reread books or you're picking up a sequel, that feeling of like, I hope this is as good as I remember. How many of you find that you experience that as well? And just in general, what are your thoughts about these books, and what books have you picked up this year that you were really highly anticipating? Did they meet your expectations or not? Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.